We're living right now in a time when everyone feels like there is a lot of misinformation and there's a lot of stories that need to be told to humanize others.
Mhm.
And music can be a really useful tool to appreciate the multidimensionality of someone from another culture. But that's what I've learned in ethnomusicology is how do you actually use music to be able to get to what this person is about. But we're not going to expect everyone to become an ethnomusicologist. I think there is a lot of space for arts-based learning or music education, not to learn to play music, but to learn about other aspects of life through music.
Yo, you made it. My name is Omar and I'm honored to welcome you to the Gumcast, where we have deep conversations about the human spirit and what keeps us going despite the shittiness of it all. Our goal is to encourage you to feel seen, heard, and understood. So tune in for real and raw conversations and become part of them on findgumption.com. Mina, finally, welcome to the Gumcast.
Oh, thank you, Omar. Thank you for creating the Gumcast.
You are very welcome. I've interviewed many of the humans that you've introduced me to, and I think you single-handedly are responsible for a lot of the people I really love in the Bay Area. So thanks for giving me a lot of interviews beforehand, and thanks for being in the studio. What do you think of this space? It's a very elaborate studio.
It is a very colorful and scary space with lots of possibility.
Lots of possibilities. That's what I was going for. What's important is we'll focus on what we know, not what we don't know. But thanks for appreciating that. Thanks for being here. I've been just fascinated by your story since I met you. I've been also stalking you. If you haven't realized, I've been moving like a few months after you moved somewhere. I moved very close to it. Like first you were in the Mission and I moved to the Mission, and now we're in Oakland. So I hope that doesn't freak you out more than the studio.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, but I've been really excited about this because you've shared so many stories with me in general, and the format is rooted in personal narrative. And today we're going to be talking about our relationship to music, which is something that you know a thing or two about. So how do you feel about that topic?
Oh, I like to think about it a lot.
Like most of your life?
I don't know if I know more about it than other people. I can only speak about my relationship to music, and I'm always curious to hear about other people's relationship with music.
That's an excellent way to enter into this episode with some curiosity. And before we start and before we get into the depth of, and this is one topic that we can go into so many spirals with, I would love to start with a personal story so that people can understand your own relationship to music. So what's one story that sticks out to you as important in your own development of your relationship with music? Let's start there.
When I think about my relationship with music, it starts from my childhood. And my relationship with music started in my family with my parents, who are not musicians in the sense that they don't play musical instruments, but they are big listeners, both classical and Arabic music. We used to go to either the opera house or the Arabic musical concerts, Arabic classical musical concerts, since I was younger than 10 years old. It used to be a drag when I was a kid. I didn't like going to spend my weekend in a theater listening to music that is considered to be a little classical, both the Western and Arabic music. And then I went out of that and I listened to all kinds of other types of music growing up. And when I was a teenager, something happened that I didn't realize was so important, and then came to become a lot more defining as I grew older. I wanted to be part of a musical making community. And at that time, there was no music classes in our schools. I used to go to church. I used to be Christian. And
I was just about to say everything you said so far about music is very similar to my relationship with religion.
oh,
Like
wow.
going to a place with my parents on the weekend that I didn't want to go to, and then when a teenager something happens and changing my relationship
I
with
hope
it.
you did not become a fundamentalist like that. So I used to go to church, and then I thought, oh, maybe I'll be part of the choir. This is something. And I went, it was right before Christmas, and I went to the conductor and I asked him to be part of the choir. He asked me, do you know this hymn? And I didn't know the hymn, but I was worried that if I don't know the hymn, he would not let me into the choir. So I said, yeah, I know the hymn. And he said, why don't you sing it? And I didn't know the hymn. So he's like, what? Why don't we sing it together? And I was trailing him while singing it. And obviously, I didn't know what I was singing. So he's, why don't you practice and come back next week and we do this again? So I practiced all week and went back and went to him after the mass was over, and I was like, I'm here, I practiced it, and I'm interested in doing this audition or whatever. I didn't even know what an audition was at the time. And he was like, Mina, people have different talents, and you have to ask God what talent you have, because it might not be music, but you'll find it somewhere else. and as a teenager who doesn't even know anything about the culture of music making, I didn't even know where to take this. I accepted it as a fact, and I left, and I didn't even think about it much. Fast forward a few years, and I went to work at a hotel. It was my first summer job. I was 17, and this hotel was on the Mediterranean coast in Egypt, and it was owned by family friends of mine. And when they asked me, what do you want to do? I told them I'd be happy to do whatever. I don't have any skills. I don't have any training. They put me in the front desk, and a few days later, the DJ resigned, and they were like, you don't know anything about the front desk, so do you want to be the DJ? And as an accidental DJ, I started learning about music from the perspective of someone who has to play music for a nightclub every evening. It was all trial and error. I was a self-learned DJ, and I became really interested in both music and the way that music can profoundly impact the experience of people in a hotel. So I decided, I was 17, I was thinking about where I'm going to go to college, and I decided I'm going to be a DJ and I'm going to go study hospitality. And that's what I did after that.
I love how God appeared on the dance floor and showed your talents. They're right there.
God was
unexpected.
much more present on that dance floor than it was in that choir, I would say. Me, at least. That was my
That's what they told you at church.
Yeah. The story started there. I started asking myself questions about how music can create a sense of community, a temporary sense of community on the dance floor, and going back and forth between creating a space for people to experience a sense of community in a hotel and making music that facilitates that experience. And I think that relationship between community building, community facilitation, and music has become the theme for most of what I've done after that.
That's awesome. There's a lot of what you jumped into later that I want to get into, but tell us more about this phase in your life when you were a DJ. How long did that last? And were you playing in hotels, or were you then going on and doing like your own parties?
So after that summer of trial and errors, where I
one trial, many errors,
where many people suffered on the dance floor, I was about to graduate from high school, and a lot of my friends in high school were like, "Oh, Mina, about DJing, why don't you find the DJ for our graduation? What do you call that party when high schoolers, the prom?"
Yeah.
Yes. So I got to meet a DJ that was probably the most famous DJ in Egypt at the time, to bring him to
Ali and Fida.
No, this was way back, 94. It was, his name was Hani Wahba.
Oh yeah.
And we became friends, and he was like, "Oh, you're a DJ. Why don't you come work with me?" So my freshman and sophomore years of college, I was studying hospitality by day and DJing by night. I became the DJ for all the weddings and parties that were in our community, Heliopolis and all over Cairo. And I also was DJing for all of our friends' parties, so birthdays, university parties, Halloween, or any other party that we had. And I think that lasted for about 4 years while I was in college in Egypt. And at some point, I felt like I was not finding the education I was looking for in hospitality in Egypt. And I wanted to do something more than DJing. I didn't know what it was. I really loved what I was doing while I was DJing, but I felt there was something more to music than spinning records and parties. And that was the impetus for transferring to Florida, where I studied hospitality and then later on discovered ethnomusicology by mistake.
So ethnomusicology is a whole study of exactly maybe what you experience on that dance floor, like community, humans, and music. So you're the only ethnomusicologist that I know. How many of you are there in the world?
Ethnomusicology is a small field. It's a relatively recent discipline that came about with musicologists who are traditionally studying Western classical music, who were interested in music that is not Western classical, and anthropologists who were studying different cultures. And when it came to music, they felt like they maybe lacked the musical training to be able to understand that specific facet of culture. So there were anthropologists who knew music, and there were musicologists who were interested in other cultures, and they somehow merged into ethnomusicology. You could think of it as anthropology of music, or more simply, the study of people making music. Any people anywhere in the world, dead, alive. They don't have to be exotic. They don't have to be of a culture that is ethnic. It could be electronic music. It could be Western classical music. You study it from an ethnomusicological or anthropological point of view. So it's very interdisciplinary. It's mostly academic. And then there is a smaller subset of applied ethnomusicologists. So I'm one of that smaller subset where we don't spend our time doing research and field work and writing books and teaching at the university. We work somewhere outside of academia. Now, I happen to be working at a university, but I'm not a faculty at the musicology department.
Fascinating. And it makes a lot of sense, because when we think of culture and learning about people, music is frequently the thing. Music and food first come to mind, right? Like when you go to Siwa, for instance, like you eat the food, you listen to the music, and that's pretty much how we like get exposed to the culture. And it's easier with music, I feel, in food than language, for instance, because you don't necessarily understand what people are saying. But it's such an important facet. So I'm curious to know first, before we get into like how you try to apply ethnomusicology and create that community, were you developing your own interaction with music? Were you still DJing? Were you playing music while you were studying, or were you focused more on the culture academic part in those years?
So it started, this is the mistake or the chance that like led me to ethnomusicology. I did my first summer internship when I moved to the US at Disney World. And I lived with lots of Brazilians in Disney World. I had just come back from that summer in Disney, and I was catching up with a friend of mine and telling her about all the Brazilians that I was living with. And she was like, "Oh, I play in a Brazilian samba group. You should join us. It's fun. It's a lot of fun." That was not really, at that point, I didn't play any instruments. I had dabbled with violin a little bit, but that's another story. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to check it out. So I went and I joined what was an ethnomusicology ensemble on campus that played Brazilian music. And like there was a Brazilian group, there were also groups from West Africa, from like Indian classical music, Balinese gamelan, Peruvian, all sorts of groups from everywhere in the world. So it opened my horizon to all of these different musical traditions that I was interested in, I was curious about, but I didn't know were available to students in the US. This is not something that's available to us in the American University in Cairo, anywhere else in Egypt. So from the Brazilian group, I started playing other styles of music and then realized there's an academic discipline that these ensembles are connected to, that this is a department of ethnomusicology that involves both practical playing skills and academic courses. So I decided at that point that I'm going to study ethnomusicology for my master's, but with a hospitality degree, I didn't have the undergraduate music education training to study ethnomusicology. So I extended my undergraduate yet another 2 years to get a music undergraduate degree so that I can pursue graduate studies in ethnomusicology.
Huh. And had you moved to California by then, or was that all?
That was all in Florida.
Okay.
I moved to California. I moved to Santa Barbara to do my master's in ethnomusicology. In ethnomusicology, it really matters where you're going to go because you're studying with professors that specialize in the same musical tradition, most likely. So I personally was interested in studying the music of gypsies, and Santa Barbara had a number of faculty members who were focused on those musical traditions of gypsies in Egypt and India. So I didn't know anything about Santa Barbara. I just ended up moving to California for that, and I never went back.
Yeah. Not a bad place to land. So please, like, enchant us with the ethnography around gypsies.
I got in my car after work, and on NPR, there was a program about the music of the gypsies. And part of the story was that the gypsies were thought to come from Egypt. That's why they're called gypsies. It comes from the word Egyptian. It's the same root.
I never made that connection. Interesting.
As it turns out, they are not from Egypt, but that's how we think.
It's a very short-lived moment for me.
So there are gypsies in Egypt, but the word gypsy was another. So the story is that there were people of North Indian origin that migrated. There was a big migration. No one really knows the reason why. There may have been a drought. There was probably a war that created an exodus of a large group of people from North India, current day Rajasthan, Punjab. And these people just migrated west to Pakistan and Central Asia, and then arrived in the Middle East and Syria. And some of them went south and came to Egypt, and some of them went north and went to Turkey and then Greece. And in Greece, right off the coast of Mani, which is across the water from Kythera, a place you've been, there is a small town called Little Egypt. People asked them, "Where are you from?" And they said, "We just came from Little Egypt," which was the village that they just left. So they thought they came from Egypt. So they confused the little village in Greece with the country Egypt. So they Greeks ended up seeing more and more of those people and kept calling them Egyptians. So everyone started thinking these are Egyptians, and the word Egyptian turned into gypsy, gitano, ejito. And for a long time, we thought they were Egyptians, or the world thought they were Egyptians. And then a German linguist, I would say centuries later, was studying the language of the gypsies, which is called Romani, and discovered that it has a big shared lexicon with Sanskrit-derived languages, the modern Hindi and Punjabi and Rajasthani, North Indian languages. So in linguistics, you can quantify the lexicon and say, this is when this language diverged. And they were able to say, okay, these people left India at that point in time. So this is when this language branched out. One summer, I was in Paris with my parents, and I was in the subway, and I heard a violinist playing in the subway. So when you're walking in these tunnels, you hear the sound, but you don't know where the music is coming from. And this violinist was just incredible. So my parents are trying to get to the subway so that we can take the subway to go where we're supposed to go. And I am looking in the tunnels for that violinist. I'm trying to find the source of that sound. So we end up getting to the sound, but the violinist was on the other side. And then the train came, And I got in the train and we left. So when I started thinking about where my relationship with gypsies started, this was like the first moment that I could remember. I didn't notice that I had been DJing alongside many gypsy groups in Egypt until many years later, when I discovered that there are lots of gypsies in Egypt and some of them we don't recognize as gypsies. So my research was about the idea of gypsy identity and gypsy imagination in music, the story of their migration from India into Europe and the Middle East, and how that story was told in a musical context. So there were films and festivals that were trying to tell that story of the migration of the gypsies from India into the Middle East and Europe through musical acts. And that story was told to varying degrees of success. And in some cases, the story helped make people more curious, more interested in the gypsies. And in some cases, the audience was using the story to further exoticize those gypsies. There's a lot of Orientalism in world music, and there was a lot of nonverbal cues in the performances that would lead people to hang on to Orientalizing ideas that they've had from before. And my conclusion was that ethnomusicologists have a role to play in ensuring that a musical experience of that kind requires contextualizing and requires a clear educational framework to ensure that this music actually does what we think it should be doing, which is helping people understand each other.
How do we discern between a music that is just commercial and music that connects or is authentic?
It's less about authenticity. It's more about whether this music is helping you learn about this other person, how your ideas of the musician or the culture that is represented on stage is evolving through this musical experience. When you see something and you don't have any context, you're led to make your own conclusions, which is something we all do. We have to, in order to be able to appreciate and understand the world. You have to stereotype and exoticize in order to become fascinated enough to become curious to learn about something else. But the question is, where do you stop? If you're looking to just live with these stereotypes and these kind of simplistic ideas of other cultures, it might not be very helpful. We're living right now in a time when everyone feels like there is a lot of misinformation and there's a lot of stories that need to be told to humanize others.
Mm-hmm.
And music can be a really useful tool to appreciate the multidimensionality of someone from another culture. But that's what I've learned in ethnomusicology, is how do you actually use music to be able to get to what this person is about. We're not going to expect everyone to become an ethnomusicologist. I think there is a lot of space for arts-based learning or music education, not to learn to play music, but to learn about other aspects of life through music. So.
So I would like to transition to some of the applied things. When I first met you, you were on tour for the Nile Project, and you were playing some of your last concerts there. It was a very ambitious project that you brought to life and applied this idea of solving some of the biggest problems with music and showing the goodness in music. First, tell us about what the Nile Project concept was, and then maybe we can get into like why you got fascinated with this problem of water in the Nile.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the Nile Project is a very practical project, even though it sounds audacious, ambitious. And you can only understand why it's practical when you understand the problem that it's trying to solve. The Nile is the longest river in the world. It runs through 11 countries. It starts in Lake Victoria, that's surrounded by Congo, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and Kenya. And then it flows into South Sudan. Then it meets the Blue Nile in Sudan. And the Blue Nile, if there's a White Nile and the Blue Nile, and the Blue Nile is coming from Ethiopia. And the two of them merge in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, and then it flow into Egypt and empty in the Mediterranean. So there are 11 countries with a population of about 450 million people. And this population is going to double in the next 25 years. So you heard the names of those countries. Most of them are some of the poorest in the world if they are not in a civil war. And they have very little capacity to cooperate. They don't have stable governments and they don't have the infrastructure. So there is a big water conflict happening because many of those upstream countries that were colonized by the British are trying to build dams to generate energy, and those dams will control the water that is the source of life for Sudan and Egypt that are desert countries. Obviously, the downstream countries, Egypt and Sudan, are worried about that, and they don't want dams to be built in Ethiopia or in Kenya or any of these other countries. So there's a big hydropolitical dilemma because the Nile, even though it is the longest river in the world, it's also one of the skinniest rivers in the world. So there's not enough fresh water to go around. And the fact that these governments don't have the capacity to solve that problem makes you wonder, so how are we going to solve that problem if there's not going to be enough water? And if these governments don't have those solutions, what can be done? And the obvious place to start is everywhere outside the government. That's the private sector, civil society, individuals, and citizens from these different countries. And one of the first steps to engage all these non-governmental entities is to first explain the problem. The problem is that most of these countries don't even think of themselves as part of the same region because the Nile challenges our geography of Africa. It flows from sub-Saharan Africa into North Africa, two regions we never think of as connected. So most people don't even know those 11 countries. If you ask an Egyptian what countries the Nile flows through, they'll probably be able to answer with maybe 3 countries out of the 11. So we don't really have the basic awareness, geographical awareness, let alone the historical awareness, the environmental, hydrological awareness to even know who we need to engage in dialogues with in order to cooperate and figure out a solution to this problem. So the Nile Project, what it's trying to do is just connect people from these different countries, create a space, use music, what we just talked about, as an engine for curiosity, to trigger transboundary, cross-cultural curiosity. If you don't know where this water is coming from, that you see flowing every day outside your house, when you see these people on stage that are playing instruments that may be similar to yours, but they look different, or they may be playing completely new instruments, you become curious about these people. They actually live on the same river, but you have no idea where they live, what language they speak, what's their story. And what we are doing in the Nile Project is bringing musicians from these 11 countries together to almost present a model for the way citizens from these countries can collaborate and can play a significant role in addressing some of those sustainability issues. In this case, the cultural sustainability of having a space for citizen diplomacy and citizen collaborations. And also, a lot of people were interested in the music. It's fascinating. It's music from these 11 countries that are so connected to the Nile for thousands of years. The Nile has played a pivotal role in the development of these cultures, in the evolution of these musical traditions, some of which are actually connected because people have migrated up and down the valley, but we don't know that. We don't know that there is a Nilotic tribe that moved from Sudan to South Sudan to Uganda to Kenya that play the same style of music, that have similar narratives and stories. So we were using the cultural capital that the Nile occupies in all these cultures, to get people to realize how much they have in common in order to solve the Nile sustainability problem we have today.
What's one of the most rewarding moments of the project for you?
The first concert, our first concert, was one of the most rewarding moments.
Where was it?
It was in Aswan,
Oh.
where we started. In 2013, we had our first residency in Aswan. And
This one is in Egypt.
Aswan is in the south of Egypt.
Most of the pharaonic temples and a lot of pharaonic culture.
Yeah.
What people
and
associate
Nubia.
with ancient Egypt and Nubia. Yeah.
And Nubia is split between Egypt and Sudan. So Aswan is like the southernmost city in Egypt where the high dam was built. And because of the construction of the high dam and Lake Nasser, the reservoir behind the dam, a lot of the Nubian villages in that area were inundated by the reservoir, and the Nubians had to migrate, which we're talking about a culture that is more than 10,000 years old. Nubian language predates ancient Egypt. One of the most rewarding moments was to see no one knew what the Nile Project was, and we didn't even know what the Nile Project was because we just got these musicians together and they were making music for the first time. So we had no idea what would happen when we go on stage, whether this music will make people happy or sad. Is it going to be a lively concert? Is it going to be a dance concert? Because no one composed all the music. The music was all composed by all the musicians in small clusters. It was really putting a puzzle together, and without knowing what the final picture would look like. And it was everything. It was a very happy concert. A lot of people were dancing and crying all night, and we recorded it, and it's our first album, and I highly recommend it. It's called Aswan.
Aswan. And how many albums did you guys record?
We recorded 3 albums. Aswan was the first one. Our second one was in Uganda. It's called Jinja, which is the city where Lake Victoria becomes the White Nile. And our third album is called Tana, which is the lake that's the source of the Blue Nile.
And we'll add links to all these in the episode description. But is there a certain place you want to direct people to? Is there
We have a website you can go to. It's nileproject.org.
Okay, perfect. And people can listen to some of the music.
They can listen to all the music. It's on Spotify and all the...
Great. We'll add these links. You had a music school before Nile Project, right? Called Zambaleta. It was in San Francisco?
In the Mission.
In the Mission. You were trying to recreate it with a mission that attracted me personally to one of your classes, which is to help people find the music within them and find their own relationship with music, even if they don't associate as being musicians. And it was very interesting for me to be in that class because I'm very resistant to music classes because I took a lot of piano classes when I was young, and that made me feel like a failure. And I got so bored, and I had to almost convince myself that I can play piano again. And if it wasn't for YouTube, I wouldn't do it because I almost can't receive instructions from someone else. I feel like even though the class was a long time ago, it opened up something like some sort of boldness inside of me when it comes to music. And I'm realizing it now when I'm going to open mics in Oakland. And just yesterday, actually, I sang one of my poems.
Wow.
And it's really interesting that I was able to do it with no training in singing. But I was just thinking about that today, and I'm just connecting this as we speak now, that I remember us doing the... And there was like this kind of building of, as weird as it was, building of this muscle that I didn't know I had. And it felt so natural and improvised and fun. So what was the idea behind that?
When you're in a conservatory or in a music school, in a formal musical training environment, musicianship tends to be more about ear training and sight singing. So you're like reading from notes, or you're listening to music and you can transcribe it or write it down. So it has a lot to do with literacy, with being able to read and write notation, which is not necessarily what this class is about. This might be one muscle that is important for making music, but this class was really more about musicality, about being able to hear and to produce the sound and to know how to produce the sound from your body if you're singing or if you're playing a percussion instrument, rhythm and tone, and how to be in your body, how to be aware of what's going on inside of you in your relationship with music that is ever evolving. And also to learn skills about practicing and learn how to play by ear, to improvise. So there are all these different musical muscles that are, sometimes you could find classes for all of those muscles independently. But what this project was attempting to do was to combine them in the same way that a good music teacher combines all of those skills. So unfortunately, so much musical training is so poor and for many people is traumatizing. Just like you described, you have no idea how many stories of uh, that people have shared of having been led into musical training that became traumatic, that changed their relationship with that instrument or with music altogether, or with their sense of their own identity as musician, non-musician. So there is a lot of, especially if you're working with adults, there's a lot of unpacking that needs to be done. And there's a lot of process in rediscovering one's own relationship with music and musicality. And all of that is necessary in order for you to find your voice, to develop a sense of your authentic voice. What is really you? It's like when you're writing, you have to manage your inner critic, you have to learn structure, you have to learn form, but you also have to keep at it every day. And there's a lot of psychology around what are the healthy habits around developing this creative practice.
So before we close, tell us more about your current role with UC Berkeley and Cal Performances and what you're putting out in the world.
I've had an affiliation with UC Berkeley over the past few years. I started as a senior fellow at the Othering and Belonging Institute, working on applying some of what we've learned from the Nile Project as a musical project that attempts to break cycles of othering and build a sense of belonging, what we call bridging in the language of the Institute. And since last year, I joined the Performing Arts Center on campus. It's called Cal Performances, and I'm the Director of Education, Campus, and Community Engagement. And we have many education programs. One that I'm particularly focused on is a new program called Illuminations that focuses on a particular theme every year. And we present a number of performances that help us shed some light on that topic. Last year's theme was place and displacement. And this year's theme is human and machine, looking at developments in technology that elicit either hopes or fears in people when we're talking about artificial intelligence or all kinds of other forms of technology that make us daunted or excited about the possibilities of these technologies we're creating.
Awesome. If I find a way to integrate AI into the podcast, can UC Berkeley sponsor us?
I think UC Berkeley is looking for as many sponsors as you are. So I'm happy to help in any way I can.
A mic or two,
I think
maybe.
we might need AI to help us both.
May AI and music help us both find the grants we need.
I just want to thank you for this wonderful conversation and cast.
Thank you so much, Mina. Thanks for everything you've shared with us, everything you've put out in the world before, all the people you've introduced me to that have enlightened my life and this podcast, and for being here on a school night and doing this with me. Thanks, man.
Thank you.